Hi guys, today I'm going to discuss about web application security. So this is the agenda. We will be discussing about web application introduction, OWASP, buffer overflow, parameter tampering, CSRF, how to prevent web application attacks, and then finally introduction to OSTEAM. So why application security? So my point is application security is not deploying security controls and leave it like that. But application security is more than that. So application security is critical to IT strategy. Many of today's security professionals, they are beginning to recognize that unprotected web applications, they have become more attractive targets for the cyber criminals. Those are looking for an easy entry points to the enterprise network. So application security is no longer optional. It has become absolute necessity. Proactive prevention is more effective than a reactive detection. So what is OWASP? So OWASP is an organization that basically identified top 10 attack. Those are given. So SQL injection. In SQL injection, what attacker basically inject malicious string that basically trigger the database, and the result of that attacker basically use malicious or crafted SQL command to execute unexpected command. So there are three use cases. For example, returning more data than expected. So this one is the example. If we can see that here is attacker is using this malicious command. When this malicious command is hitting this backend server, so it is returning data of all students. Next is elevating the privileges of user access, or user privileges. So by using some malicious command, attacker is basically gaining more than what he or she is basically, if he or she is the read-only user. So by elevating privileges of the user. Next is use case is altering the product price. Using SQL injection, an attacker can basically alter the price. For example, e-commerce website like eBay or Bunnings or TradeMe. So the attacker can reduce the price from, let's say, 300 or 500 to maybe $5 or $20, and then add it to the cart and pay the price. Broken authentication. So this broken authentication is basically as a result of unencrypted connection or not properly encrypted. Like if someone is using a vulnerable version of SSL, like SSL version 2 or TLS version 1.1 or 1.2. So the most secure TLS version nowadays is version 1.3. Sensitive data exposure. So sensitive data exposure may be compromised without proper protection as a result of not doing encryption for the data that is basically in transit or at rest. XML external entities. So this scenario is basically if there is a federated account authentication. For example, we are going on the website and we are using, instead of creating our own account, so we are using our existing Gmail, Facebook or LinkedIn account. So if this third-party XML validation is not properly secured, so attacker can insert malicious XML contents to get useful information. Next is broken access control. Similarly, attackers can exploit some vulnerabilities or flaws to access unauthorized functionality or and access other user account, view sensitive files, modify user data, or change access right. Security misconfiguration is the most common issues. This is commonly as a result of insecure default configuration, for example, incomplete or ad hoc configuration, open cloud storage, or misconfigured HTTPS header. Next is very important, cross-site scripting. If I can lower this graph a little bit down. So out of 10 OS, the most complex one is cross-site scripting. According to CVE details, there are more cross-site scripting attacks in year 2018 and in 2017 as well. So it has three flavors: document object model, that is type 0, then persistent or stored type 1, and then third one is um, reflected or non-persistent. So from document object model, as we can see in this diagram, so here is our browser. Here are three elements of the basically website: the static one HTML, and the dynamic one is JavaScript, that is backend of the website, and the third one is CSS, that is basically cascaded style sheets. So what is happening in the DOM-based cross-site scripting? So everything is happening in the client. Persistent or stored based cross-site scripting attacks, we can see that here is attacker. So attacker is basically he's discovering that there is some vulnerability in the website and injecting some malicious script in the website. So when some visitor is visiting the website, so now the visitor session is sent to the attacker. Okay, so reflected or non-persistent cross-site scripting type 2. So basically server echoes back malicious input. Here is the example. So difference between persistent or non-persistent and DOM based. So difference between the three types of cross-site scripting is when attack is added or injected into the application. With reflected stored, the attack is injected in the application during server-side processing of the request, where untrusted input is dynamically added to HTML. So for DOM-based cross-site scripting, the attack is injected into the application during runtime in client directory. So what is the difference between SQL injection and cross-site scripting injection? So main difference between SQL injection and cross-site scripting injection attack is that SQL injection attacks are used to steal information from database, so backend database, whereas cross-site scripting attacks are used to redirect users to the website where attackers can steal data from them. So SQL injection is database focus, whereas cross-site scripting is geared toward attacking end users. Insecure deserialization. For insecure deserialization, we need to understand first serialization. So serialization refers to a process of converting an object into a format which can be persisted, while deserialization is the opposite. When someone basically sent some stream of bytes in database, network, or files, so deserialization is opposite. So when someone is accessing this data, so it is deserialized. So if there is some vulnerability, so that will be exploited by the attacker. Using component with known vulnerabilities. So known security vulnerabilities are those gaps in the securities that have been identified either by the developer or the vendor of the product. So how to mitigate is using a web to block HTTP requests to unused functionality of components, block HTTP requests to server-side component in the public web page. Insufficient logging and monitoring. What happened in the security world? Sometime security administrator, they are basically using some existing logging and monitoring, but insufficient logging and monitoring is more than that. So it is basically threat hunting for those escape one logs. Those are basically escape from the traditional logging system. Buffer overflow is a sequential section of memory allocated to contain anything from a character string to an array of integers. So a buffer overflow or a buffer overrun occurs when a more data is put into fixed length buffer than the buffer can handle. So the extra information which has to go somewhere can overflow into the adjacent memory space, so corrupting or overwriting the data that is held in the space. So how to prevent this buffer overflow attacks? To prevent buffer overflow attacks, so developers of C or C++ applications should avoid standard library functions that those are not bounds checked, such as gets or scanf or string copy. So in addition, secure development practices should be included regular testing to detect and fix buffer overflows. Parameter tampering is a form of web-based attack in which certain parameters in the uniform resource locators. So we can see here the patient ID is here. So the attacker can change this patient ID and and basically access the user record. Cross-site request forgery. So the cross-site request forgery basically sometime it's pronounced as CSERF. So also known as one-click attack or season riding. Is a type of malicious exploit when unauthorized commands are transmitted from the user that web application trust. So the example is a web user logs into the bank account. The bank gives back to the session token. Basically, now it is authenticated. So hackers at the same time tricks the user by sending email with malicious links. So difference between cross-site scripting and cross-site request forgery is basically cross-site request forgery happens in an authenticated session when the server trusts the user or browser, while cross-site scripting does not need an authenticated session and can be exploited anytime. How to prevent it? So there are anti-forgery token in ASP.NET MVC5 security application. So developers can use that and to make sure that the web application is secure enough. So how to prevent web application attacks? So escaping the user inputs, very important. Like the certain special characters. These are the special characters. So validating input, implement content security policy on the web application by installing anti cross-site scripting library in ASP.NET. MVC5 security application provide that. Last one is sanitizing. So all during design phase, coding phase, and testing phase, it is important to make a mix of code review, automated static testing during the development, and dynamic testing once the application is live. In addition, of course, to use secure coding practices that will help prevent vulnerabilities like cross-site scripting in the first place. Last one is OSTEAM, that is open source security testing methodology. It is an open security testing methodology. It's basically a document that providing the quality of enterprise security as well as methodology and strategy of testers. So basically, OSTEAM is a set of rules and regulations for penetration testing, ethical hacking, and information security analysts, which involves tools and testing. That's all for today. I hope you like it. Please comment, suggest if anything, if you want to add anything. Thank you very much. See you. Bye.